Welcome back, Visions fans. Ready Player Will here. There's been this growing sentiment of people talking about Skahal and his potential future usage, pending a couple changes coming into the game, and one of them just got announced this week about his character's MA2, which has been on the back burner for quite some time. So I'm going to take this video to talk a little bit about what that is, where some of that excitement comes from, but really talk more about the game balance and how it's shifted to enable this to even be potentially possible in the first place, given how Skahal's never really had a time to shine per se, and that his brightest days might actually be ahead of him. Now, why the excitement? The obvious first and foremost reason people are excited by the MA2. That being said, this is actually a relatively minor part of it in my opinion. Obviously an MA2 is a nice thing where you can upgrade a character, but more importantly than that is the Black Mage job updates, which are coming live this week. These are a far more material factor in my opinion to him actually being usable. But there's also some things outside of him which are also affecting his potential usage. One of them is the newer lightning characters and how that cast of characters has diversified over time compared to where it might have been in the past as a strength. You also have some newer balance related items which will help enable this to come to fruition as well. The Prunus Lamina +6 is one of them. Dark Ramuh Vision Card and Esper are both two other components, but then also the game balance revolving around Earth kind of in reserves when you talk about lightning magic as a concept, and I'll talk about that more in length in just a couple slides here. Now, Skahal's MA2, if we look at it, initially it was just magic 20% and these decreases of 200 to the cast time of both attack and non-attack types. What they're giving them is a handful of other upgrades here, some of them pretty standard, but the ones that aren't changing are his original 3, so those are remaining exactly the same, but he is getting the standard HP of 10%, which realistically is only 278 more HP for him, but it is some extra HP for your allies. The lightning attack 15, kind of the same concept, an extra 15 for him, but it's really more also for your teammates, that when you put him in a mono lightning comp, your teammates also benefit as well. That agility of 10% is 5 extra agility for him. Currently, with vision cards in both the main and sub slots, he can achieve up to 75 innate agility. This will put him up to the UR average of 80 though, so that is a nice agility bump so that he's at least average with the rest of the characters. The spear penetration of 20 is also a very, very big one. Prior to this, he had no spear penetration whatsoever in the kit, or in any abilities, or in any passives, or in any buffs anywhere. But now he can at least get the 20 with another 10 from the trust stones for at least a minimum of 30 at all times. In the current state of the game, that's an absolute necessity. And then finally, the 200% chance to ignore fatal damage is essentially courage, but when your health pool is above 70%. Now, I think a lot of people misunderstand what this really means from an equipment, or at least from a strategic perspective. It's more than just courage. What it realistically means is extra gear flexibility. Now, if you look at someone's resistances, and these are Skahal's, we're going to use the negative 10% missile resistance as an example. Prior to this MA upgrade, what you'd have to effectively do is find some way to turn those negatives into positives. Otherwise, he's probably going to get one shot by most everything out there. Which means if you have to equip, let's say, the Platinum Robe as your armor for the missile resistance, or an Esper that has missile resistance, that's taking the place of something else that could be there instead. So what this courage effectively means is you don't have to gear at all for those weaknesses, knowing that even if he gets one shot, he'll retain the courage. So instead of needing to equip the Platinum Robe for that missile resistance, you can now put on Pod 153 or the Alex Ring or the bow tie or the Terror Ribbon or whatever you want, because you don't have to worry about him being one shot by that negative weakness. Which means your Skahal can be relatively more tuned than he could be prior. You're still going to die in 2 hits, but at least this way you can gear him in a way that probably gets some more upside value, where if you formerly had, let's say, turned him into 10% positive missile resistance, maybe you don't get one shot, but you definitely get killed the second time. It still takes 2 hits, so this time you just get brought down to 1 HP and then a second hit to follow up. But at least now you can do some extra gearing flexibility, which you'd be surprised the trickle-down effects of how important that is. Now, we look at the Black Mage job updates, which again, to me, are far more important to Skahal's overall prominence. Black Mage as a job is effectively kind of unusable in more divisions of the modern era of the game, where the amount of cast time that's on them, the overall modifiers, the lack of any kind of utility on almost all of them, very one-dimensional in what it has to offer. There's really no buffs or anything, so it was very much a power creep job where you had all these other spellcasters coming in and just doing things better. They've made some significant upgrades. The first one is to Flare, where this ability will destroy any magic barrier upon hit, which does include general barriers, so things like the Black Rosalina TMR, and then characters that even have barriers in their MA2. Characters like Victoria or Knight of Ruin Stern that have a general barrier. General is both physical and magical, so it is eligible to be broken by magical breaks like this. It's obviously an exceptional thing to be added for a good potential damage increase given where the game is right now. Now the second one that's very good is the increase to the percent chance of proc of the Toad status effect. It used to be 25%, now it's 50%. And just to give you an idea about the materiality of what that increase means, if we were to look at a couple different scenarios here in terms of percent chance to inflict Toad, these top two out of the four are against targets with 50 faith, the bottom two are against targets with 97 faith, and then within each I have either 0% innate resistance or 25% resistance, which is the Truststone passive you can equip. If you were to attack a unit with 50 faith, meaning on the lower side of things a physical damage dealer, with no innate Toad resistance, you have a 74% chance of inflicting Toad. That is fairly good. And even if that enemy does have 25% chance resistance, 37% still isn't bad either. Obviously, it's less than half the time, so it's not reliable. It's going to work in your favor a handful of times. Now, for enemies that have 97 faith, it's basically a guaranteed Toad if they have no resistance against it. And if they do, it's a coin flip at basically 50%. So greatly increased odds to potentially inflict that status ailment. It is a devastating one when used properly. Now, the next thing in the Black Mage upgrades was the increase to the magic passive to be Black Mage lore. It's an extra 12 magic attack modifier in addition to the magic percent that was given to them. So that's obviously just free modifier given out for their abilities. The next one is an upgrade to their Aga spell, so Fire Aga, Thund Aga, Blizz Aga, where it's now changed shape from just a cross-shaped AoE to a diamond AoE, and increase the range by like 1 squares to 2 squares, but also a pretty big modifier increase from 185% to 220%. Both of those things together obviously allow for far more usability of hitting multitudes of enemies across varieties of heights and ranges for much better damage. Now the next one, and this is probably less of an impact, is the increase to the Ira abilities, where it's gone from small to medium damage, 141% to 185%. This is on Skahal's sub job, so not one that you'll use often, but it's there, it's worth mentioning. But then finally, Skahal does have a unique 120 ability that is Thund Aga Disposer, which has 2 upgrades to it as well. One of them is the increase in cast speed to be used more quickly, and the other one is also a modifier increase from that same 185% to 220%. But it's also a 38% lightning imperil, a massive overall change to a level 120 ability. This, when you think about the increase to potential modifiers for this ability and Thund Aga, it's really an extra 62 modifier they've given him, all inclusive now, where you just look at 15 from his mastery ability, 12 from this upgrade to the passive, and an extra 35 from the damage modifier increase for just a flat 62 modifier extra on all these Thund Aga abilities. That's a pretty big power spike. But then the cast speed also means that you can do 2 ticks with an equipment passive, where he has 200 innately in his mastery ability. If you use Prunus Lamina or a Truststone passive or an Esper for another 200, that brings him down to a cast time of 600, which means that this 320, when used twice, so 320 plus 320, exceeds your 600. It casts in 2 ticks. That's very big for the timing of spells. But let's transition now. We'll talk a little bit more about some of the newer Lightning character additions. Now, that's not to say these characters are amazing or meta, or they're going to be meta or game-changing, but Lightning for a very long time had its main niche and strength as a very strong slash-type attacking group between Cloud and Charlotte and Esther, a handful of others. And obviously, Frederica came in there and had some missile meta there, and Lightning from Final Fantasy XIII being a big part of that slash and missile meta as well, where over time, since Skahal's initial release and even more recently, there's obviously been a lot of extra magic characters added to the Lightning cast, and the more characters that get added, the more diversity that's there, you have new opportunities to make new team synergies. So Summer Helena is one of the biggest ones here, where her addition to the game is absolutely enhanced by Skahal and what he can potentially do to enable her. But there's a handful of other magic users. Ibarra obviously is one of them as well. Resnick most definitely is one of them. Renan has absolutely underperformed, but he could be very viable in a potential Lightning magic group. But also Queen as well. Again, kind of on the lesser side of things. But the idea is basically that having this flexibility with this amount of Lightning magic characters allows for a brand new set of potential opportunities of usage in a team sense. Now we look at some other balance change things. The Prunus Lamina +6, not a major upgrade per se from a stat perspective. If you were to look at the Lightning users who could have equipped staves in the meantime, Resnick doesn't really need it because she's not offensively oriented. Renan, again, underperforms, so he's not one that you typically want to use the materials to +6 this. Skahal hasn't been usable, and Stelir kind of the same idea. But now you actually have someone in Skahal that could use this, or you are going to lean heavily into a lightning magic team where maybe Renan does use this. The equipment stats itself, not a massive increase. It's just maybe 15 to 20 magic on all 3 different builds. I do prefer the magic build of this. But one of the biggest things here is the decreased attack skill activation time of 200. Now, while this is on a Truststone passive, this is one of those things where now you can get more gear flexibility on your right side rune set, where you can go things like magic 20%, spirit penetration, and then you can do crit rate, crit damage, and then it leaves 2 slots to do whatever the heck you want with, because you don't have to worry about having decreased activation skill time anywhere in there. So overall, another thing where you can enhance his overall effectiveness by giving some gearing flexibility. One of the other enormous additions here is the Dark Ramuh Vision card. Whether on Skahal or not, obviously great stats for the unit that you do put it on, but if you were to say put it on Skahal, he does get the 460 HP, 4 defense, 3 spirit, the extra dexterity. When you look at the unit effects, that 10% missile resistance brings him from that -10 that we saw up to 0. So obviously that's a great bump, number 1. The increase of spear penetration, when you pair this with this MA2, means he's at 40 spear penetration. Another 10 from a passive puts him at 50 spear penetration. That's obviously massive increase, but then also the lightning specific upgrades where you get AoE resistance of 10 and another HP of 10%. All of these things here, fantastic for his damage output and his survivability. Not including the party effects here, magic 50%, slash resistance 10%, which as you might have seen, he is -5% to, so this puts him at positive, and the earth resistance of 15%, which we'll come back to in a minute here. Don't sleep on how important that potentially can be, but this is a great vision card for that. And one thing I'm going to talk about is just kind of this fun Ramuh synergy with the vision cards. I was going to try to keep this a little secret, but I'm sure I won't be the only one to figure this out. But there's something very kind of interesting when it comes to breakpoints and killing characters that I think the 2 Ramuh vision cards does great things for a potential lightning magic party. Now, the current damage limit cap is inherently 11,999 when you 120 a unit and level up that node. Most tank health pools are 12,000 to 13,000, if not a smidge higher, which means you can't one-shot them by the nature of your inherent mechanic. Now, you probably could with a Truststone passive of 1,000, but no one's really doing that in auto PvP. That being said, when you were to equip this in the sub-slot even, you retain the full effect of it of a 2,500 damage limit up for lightning units. And again, that's whether main slot or sub-slot, you still get full 2,500, which means the new damage maximum limit for lightning is 14,499. And just as an example, that means that you could now potentially kill Snow in 2 hits instead of 3. And just speaking through that, if you were to theoretically be capped at 12,000 here, what that would mean is you would hit Snow, you wouldn't proc his courage, but he would self-heal. That's so you have 1 hit. You'd have to hit him again to bring him down to 1 for courage, and then you have to hit him again so that you can bring him from 1 HP to 0. That's 3 hits. If you can instead surpass that 12,000 damage limit, you can immediately courage him on your first hit, and then for a follow attack, even though he regens his health, you can kill him in that second hit. Theoretically, even Summer Helena here, you can one-shot Snow because she does have that courage removal, so you can bypass that mechanic entirely, and if you exceed that 12,000 HP threshold, you can just one-shot him. So kind of something interesting to play with. One thing we have to absolutely also talk about is Dark Ramuh the Esper. This is a fantastic Esper, immensely fast at 20 agility, but the board nodes in particular are really conducive to lightning magic metas, or really more than just that. But if you were to look at the nodes here, you have Human Killer, Lightning Attack, Magic Attack, Slash Resistance, all 4 of these paths, things that Skahal in particular obviously would really like, but so wouldn't any of those other lightning magic units. But Dark Ramuh's introduction as an Esper allows for another extremely fast offensive-oriented Esper, where you could create a team of 3 magic units and do Bahamut, Dark Ramuh, and Europa, who is another lightning magic Esper. Shiva obviously kind of fits in that same idea of magic attack and agility. But the introduction of some of these other Espers has now made it so you can more feasibly field a team of 3, and all of them are equally potent from the Esper side of things as well. Which brings us finally to the last piece of the balance conversation, which is Earth kind of on the sidelines from a magic viability or anti-magic viability standpoint, that if you look at the cast of characters that makes up Earth, there's genuinely not many who are great against magic. If I were to really highlight some of the best ones, it's probably Resnick the Hoppy as one of them, Noctis as the second one, and to a much lesser degree, Winter Venera and Ketone, if only because Winter Venera has some innate magic resistance. Ketone on one of her buffs has 25% magic resistance. But even then, that's kind of a stretch. There's really not many characters that are equipped to handle a full-on lightning magic meta. Now, that's not to say that Earth wouldn't win. I need you guys to understand me here. Earth very likely could still win against a very strong magic lightning team. But it's going to take Earth much longer and way more resources in order to do so, because of what lightning can now do for some of its self-sustain, for some of the resistances you can get to, which I'm going to talk about in a second. But more than anything, even if lightning kills, let's say 1 or 2 of those Earth units, right now in Guild Wars, there's a bug that still hasn't been fixed that the vision cards of those characters don't activate for second battles. So even if lightning loses the fight, if they take out 1 or 2 of those Earth units, it makes for a much easier time for a follow-up attack. It's not nearly as much of a raffle stomp as some of those weak element versus strong element battles tend to be. Now, if you are talking about gearing specifically for this kind of matchup, the Dark Ramuh Vision card does give lightning units up to 5% Earth resistance. And I say that because lightning units start at -10, gives them 15, so it starts them at +5. You can also get 5% Earth resistance from an HP set bonus. You can also get 7% Earth resistance from a Truststone passive, which means all 3 of your lightning units could have an inherent 17% Earth resistance. Now, also throw into the fact that this is not ideal for those comps, but should you want to potentially take on these Earth teams, Golem adds another 25% Earth resistance and has those human killer nodes as well as some defensive pierce resistance. And Cactar, which is definitely a lower rated Esper, but is a magic-oriented Esper, also has 23% Earth resistance on it. The point being, you can make this lightning team very competitive with Earth teams. It is not a guaranteed loss. And obviously, at the end of the day, you can always throw a wind unit in there too, and just kind of throw off Earth. But the point is, there's not a lot of Earth anti-magic strength to contend with a very strong lightning magic team. Now, if we were to focus on Skahal's strengths, like looking at him in particular, obviously he is the benefactor of much of the game balance changes, and less so more just about like him suddenly being incredible. He specifically hasn't necessarily changed a ton, so you're going to use him kind of the same way you might have always used him. And for those of you that haven't been using this way, you absolutely should start. But that 38% lightning imperil absolutely is a big potential extra damage increase for himself and his teammates. That magic barrier break on Flare is exceptionally powerful when it comes to breaking general barriers and how prevalent those are currently. He also gets those extra large forgiving AoEs that can easily elemental chain, as well as just hit more enemies at once. It's overall a bigger damage increase because you can hit more people with it. But more than anything, you absolutely have to lean into the time mage aspect of him. He is not necessarily just a pure damage dealer. One of the best things about him is that time mage subjob, when you pair him with some of those very potent other magic damage dealers like Summer, Helena, and Ibarra, when you can suddenly haste them and quicken them and make them just onslaught, very potent lightning magic attacks, and then for him to come in range and follow up on some of that damage, the combination is just very, very potent that most people aren't geared to survive it. So that's really where he comes in and shines. But that's kind of the buzz around Skahal in a nutshell, that he is part of a potential factor that can bring these very strong lightning magic teams, as well as a bunch of balance changes. It's not just Skahal by himself, but I figured it was still a fun thing to talk about. There's going to be a lot of fun theory crafting coming on the next couple weeks because of it, and I at least wanted to get a head start and shed some light on why it was able to be a thing in the first place. But that's it for now. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to y'all soon.